The late afternoon sun painted the small town in warm amber light, casting long shadows across the empty streets. The faint hum of traffic in the distance and the occasional chirp of birds created an illusion of peace. But Sarah Mitchell walked with a quiet awareness that told a different story. To the casual observer, she was just another traveler. Khaki pants, a plain dark jacket, her hair tied back, and a messenger bag slung casually across her shoulder. Her stride was calm, almost leisurely, yet there was an undercurrent of vigilance in the way she scanned her surroundings. Every movement, every sound, every shadow registered in her mind. Years of training had taught her that the world was never truly calm. Sarah had faced ambushes in the deserts of the Middle East, navigated hostile territory in urban combat zones, and survived situations that could have killed someone half her age, half as disciplined, half as prepared. And now, in the most ordinary of towns, she felt the first stirrings of that familiar tension. She ducked into a small coffee shop, the aroma of roasted beans and pastries comforting yet oddly grounding. The bell above the door jingled, and she nodded politely to the barista, who barely glanced her way. This was a town where no one paid attention, where no one cared perfect for someone like her to move unnoticed. She ordered a simple black coffee and a pastry, then claimed a seat near the window. From here, she could see the street outside, the shop's entrance, and the side alley that ran behind the building. It was a perfect spot for observation, without seeming intrusive. As she sipped her coffee, Sarah allowed herself a small moment of reflection. She rarely had downtime like this. Even when on leave, her mind rarely rested. The seal life left a permanent imprint. Instincts honed to detect threats, reflexes sharpened to respond to danger, and a relentless drive to stay ahead of the unexpected. It wasn't paranoia, it was preparation. Her phone buzzed on the table. A text from an old comrade popped up. "You checked the routes yet?" Heard chatter about some sketchy folks in town. She smiled faintly. Not a warning, exactly, but enough to keep her attention heightened. She had always appreciated intelligence reports, even casual tips. They were like puzzle pieces, small fragments that could prevent disaster. She finished her coffee slowly, her eyes scanning the street reflexively, as if expecting the puzzle pieces to snap into place any second. And then she noticed it. A black SUV, parked a block down, too long to be ordinary, engine humming faintly. The driver sat with his hands resting on the steering wheel, too still, watching the shop. Sarah didn't flinch outwardly, but inside, her mind raced through possibilities. Surveillance? Robbery? A random threat? Her fingers traced the edge of the table, subtle and deliberate, checking for possible exit strategies. She left the shop, coffee in hand, moving toward her car parked 2 blocks away. Each step was measured, quiet, yet deliberate. She wasn't running, she didn't need to, but she maintained an awareness that made her almost invisible while simultaneously commanding the space around her. The SUV had shifted slightly, and now there were 2 more men on the street, casually strolling but clearly not coincidental. Her pulse didn't spike. It never did when she had a clear read on danger. Instead, her awareness sharpened, reflexes tensing like coiled springs. As she reached her car, she slid the key in her pocket, palms brushing leather and metal. She glanced back, casually, pretending to admire the architecture of a nearby building. But her mind cataloged every detail: footwear, stance, gait, hands, body language. All small indicators that trained eyes read like an open book. The 3 men were now subtly moving in her direction. Not fast, not alarming, but deliberate. Sarah's training kicked in fully. She noted escape routes, nearby objects that could serve as barriers, and potential distractions she could employ if things escalated. Most people would have crossed the street without a thought, unaware of the danger growing just steps behind them. Sarah didn't move hastily. She remained calm, the serenity of her demeanor belying the storm inside. And then one of the men stepped just slightly too close. A subtle miscalculation, but one that didn't escape her. Sarah's mind ran through tactical options in milliseconds. Disarmament, escape, environmental leverage, even psychological intimidation. Years of Navy SEAL training had taught her to see the world not as it appeared, but as it could become. And in that moment, the ordinary street transformed into a battlefield. A faint breeze stirred dust along the curb. She adjusted her grip on her bag, subtly shifting her weight toward the nearest alley. Her eyes never left the men. One of them, taller, with a nervous twitch in his shoulder, raised a hand to his face, maybe to adjust a mask, maybe to signal his companions. Sarah cataloged it all. Timing, motion, intent. Everything would matter in the next few seconds. She considered her options. She could run, she could fight, she could blend with the crowd, but none of these were ideal. The SEAL mindset preferred control, the element of surprise, precision, and Sarah knew she could gain both if she played this right. But first, she had to lure the situation into the open. She stepped lightly, a calculated motion that drew them closer without revealing her knowledge. The men followed, confident, emboldened by what they assumed was fear in her eyes. They didn't know she had stared down men with rifles, men with bombs, men who thought themselves untouchable. They didn't know she could neutralize a threat before it ever fully materialized. To them, she was just another civilian, vulnerable, ordinary. But Sarah had never been ordinary, not once. She had trained for moments like this, where instinct, intellect, and skill converged. Every movement, every glance, every heartbeat was part of a larger calculation. The calmness she exuded was not ignorance. It was command. And in the quiet streets of a seemingly peaceful town, that command was about to be tested in a way she had not anticipated. The SUV idled silently behind her, the men closing in, unaware of the storm they had just invited into their lives. Sarah tightened her jaw, her mind clearing all distractions. Today, she wasn't just walking through a town. She was preparing for survival, for control, and for the inevitable confrontation that would soon erupt. As she stepped toward the crosswalk, the faintest of smirks played on her lips. Danger had found her, but Sarah Mitchell had never been someone to surrender. Not now, not ever. And with that calm determination, the ordinary day teetered on the edge of chaos, ready to transform into a battle that would leave everyone who underestimated her utterly stunned. The sun dipped lower, casting long, distorted shadows across the street. Sarah's boots clicked softly on the pavement as she maintained her calm, measured pace toward her car. The black SUV lingered across the street, engine idling silently like a predator waiting to strike. Her senses, sharpened by years of SEAL training, cataloged everything: the faint scuff of shoes on asphalt, the subtle shuffle of hands in pockets, the nervous glance of the tallest man. She didn't flinch. She wasn't afraid. She was aware. And then they moved. 3 men masked, angular, and brimming with misplaced confidence closed in on her. One, the tallest, reached for her almost casually, a gun sliding from under his jacket. Sarah froze, just long enough for the world to notice, but not herself. The cold steel of the pistol pressed against her temple. A jolt of instinct ran through her nerves, and yet her face betrayed nothing. "Wallet, now? Don't make a sound," the tallest growled. The other 2 positioned themselves on either side, blocking possible exits, their eyes scanning for compliance. Their confidence was palpable, fueled by the assumption that their target, an ordinary civilian woman, was helpless. Sarah's mind raced. This wasn't a random mugging. It was too precise, too controlled. Their formation, Their spacing, the way the gunman's index finger rested lightly on the trigger, they had trained in some rudimentary sense of intimidation. But they lacked the experience, the intuition, the split-second awareness that came from real combat. And that would be their downfall. She nodded slightly, slow and deliberate, letting them believe their threat had achieved its effect. Her breathing remained steady, controlled, almost hypnotic in its calmness. She could feel the fear that they expected to see, the hesitation they thought they had extracted. But inside, her mind was executing 1,000 tactical calculations. Her eyes scanned rapidly. The street, the parked cars, the side alley just a few feet away, even the overhead fire escape. Escape routes, improvised weapons, leverage points all mapped and memorized in an instant. She noted the gunman's stance, slight forward lean, weight unevenly distributed, subtle muscle tension in his trigger arm. The tiniest misstep, the slightest twitch, and she could turn this around in an instant. "What's the rush?" she asked softly, almost innocuously, her voice calm, measured. A faint smirk tugged at the corner of her lips, invisible behind the mask of neutrality. The tallest man's eyes flickered at her tone. A flash of irritation passed. He didn't like her calm, didn't like the way she seemed to be measuring him. "Don't play games," he barked, pressing the barrel harder against her temple. Sarah didn't flinch. Instead, she shifted her weight subtly, almost imperceptibly, angling herself slightly toward the nearest wall. Her fingers brushed the zipper of her bag. Not for weapons, she carried none, but to check balance, space, and leverage. The two accomplices grew impatient. They exchanged quick, almost imperceptible glances. They underestimated her, just as every untrained thug underestimated the calm, disciplined predator in front of them. Every step they took revealed their lack of experience. Sloppy footwork, inconsistent spacing, and subtle telegraphing of intent. Sarah catalogued each error with clinical precision. She allowed her eyes to wander toward the tallest man's finger, resting lightly on the trigger. Her heart rate didn't spike training, had conditioned her body to respond without panic, but she noted it. Not a threat to her life yet, but a variable in her calculations. She prepared for contingencies, mentally rehearsing the disarm, the redirection of force, the incapacitation without loss of control. Time stretched as if the world itself was holding its breath. The men grew bolder. One jabbed toward her side with his free hand, demanding her wallet. Another inched closer, trying to read her reactions, to find the weakness they assumed existed. Sarah's lips twitched, a subtle acknowledgement of the audacity of their arrogance. The world saw three men threatening a lone woman. She saw three mistakes, each one offering a fleeting window of opportunity. Suddenly, the tallest man made a minor miscalculation, a micro-shift of weight, a tiny overextension of the arm holding the gun. In another life, another moment, it might have been inconsequential. But Sarah had trained to recognize patterns in seconds. She saw the opening, noted the risk, and prepared to act. "You really don't want to do this," she said softly, almost conversationally, and her tone carried a quiet authority that belied her calm exterior. Her voice didn't shout. It didn't need to. It was a subtle, unyielding statement that suggested danger far greater than they anticipated. The gunman sneered, dismissing her words, convinced that fear was the only language she understood. "Shut up and hand it over," he barked. Sarah's eyes flicked to the nearby alley again. It offered potential maneuvering space, a slight shadow to obscure movement, a wall for leverage. Every aspect of the environment was being logged, analyzed, turned into potential advantage. Her body tensed, poised like a coiled spring, ready to convert a single fraction of an error into decisive action. And then the world seemed to pause. A slight noise behind one of the accomplices, a dropped can from a nearby trash bin, caused a micro flicker of attention. It was small, insignificant to most. But to Sarah, it was the catalyst. In that split second, she recognized the precise moment where the tallest man's weight was slightly off-center, where his finger could be redirected, where the balance of power could shift entirely. She remained outwardly calm. Inside, she ran through her mental checklist: positioning, leverage, incapacitation, exit strategy, bystander safety. Seconds had passed, but in those seconds, she was already preparing the first move that would turn the encounter on its head. The other two men, sensing hesitation, leaned forward instinctively, trying to assert control. This was the mistake Sarah had been waiting for. Overconfidence, impatience, and the illusion that fear could be forced rather than earned. Her hands twitched subtly toward her side, maintaining composure while positioning herself for leverage. Her mind ran at lightning speed: strike, redirect, neutralize. Each potential outcome was already mapped, rehearsed, and memorized. And then it began. The tallest man jerked slightly, adjusting the gun. That micro-movement, small, almost imperceptible, was all the opportunity Sarah needed. She readied herself, muscles coiled, reflexes primed. The calm, quiet woman they thought they had cornered was far more than they had bargained for. For now, she said nothing. She moved imperceptibly, just a fraction, preparing to unleash the culmination of years of training in a single, decisive moment. The world outside continued its ordinary rhythm, unaware that chaos was about to erupt on the quiet street. The encounter had reached its tipping point. Sarah had remained calm, measured, and observant, but now the balance of power had shifted, and the next few seconds would determine who walked away. The moment stretched into eternity. Sarah Mitchell stood frozen in appearance, yet every nerve in her body was alive, every muscle coiled with latent power. The gun pressed against her temple was cold, heavy, and unforgiving, but she didn't flinch. Years of Navy SEAL training had prepared her for far worse ambushes, hostile zones, and missions where a single misstep meant death. Her mind cataloged every detail: the men's posture, their spacing, the subtle micro-expressions betraying nerves beneath their bravado. They think this is fear, she mused silently, but fear is in them, not me. The tallest man, whose gun rested too easily against her head, flexed his fingers nervously. The other two shifted slightly, one glancing down the street as though expecting backup, the other fidgeting with the hem of his jacket, clearly uneasy. Each small movement told Sarah more than their words ever could. The three men had the illusion of control, but illusions are fragile things. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and the balance of power would snap. "Wallet," the tallest man barked again. "No." Sarah's eyes flicked toward the side alley to her right, assessing angles, escape routes, potential leverage points. Her training had taught her to view every situation as a three-dimensional puzzle, a blend of timing, space, and human behavior. In seconds, she created multiple contingencies, rehearsing mental simulations of how the encounter could unfold: disarm, redirect force, incapacitate, escape. Every possibility weighed against the risk. The men didn't realize she was already ahead of them. They saw a silent, calm woman, but they didn't see the predator inside. They didn't see the countless nights spent in hostile zones, tracking targets, evading detection, neutralizing threats. They didn't see the precision, discipline, and intuition honed over years in the Navy SEALs. "Don't try anything funny," the tallest man warned, tightening his grip on the gun. His voice carried both threat and uncertainty, a nervous tremor disguised by aggression. Sarah tilted her head slightly, an imperceptible movement, just enough to gauge the pressure applied by the gun. It wasn't excessive, not yet, but it didn't need to be. One slip from him, one twitch, would provide the window she required. Her breathing remained calm, controlled, a rhythm that contrasted sharply with the rising tension in the assailants. The second man, attempting to assert dominance, leaned forward slightly, his eyes darting toward her hands. "Hand it over, now," he said, voice cracking with forced authority. But Sarah noticed the subtle tells, the slight tremor in his jaw, the tense shoulders, the hesitation in his stance. Inexperienced men relying on weapons to enforce control often revealed themselves through small, almost invisible flaws, and she was trained to see every one of them. Her lips curved into the faintest smile, though she kept her face neutral. There was amusement in her mind at their ignorance. They assumed fear could be manufactured. They assumed intimidation worked in a vacuum. They assumed that a gun pressed to a civilian's head equaled dominance. They were wrong. "You really don't understand who you're messing with," she murmured, low enough that the words were almost lost in the ambient noise of the street. Her voice carried calm authority, the kind that forced attention without raising volume. It unsettled them in ways they couldn't articulate. One of the men scoffed, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. "You think we care about who you are?" Sarah's mind catalogued the response, filing it away. Arrogance, overconfidence, the need to assert dominance, perfect mistakes for someone trained to exploit them. Every micro-expression, every shift in weight, every subtle muscle twitch informed her next action. She knew exactly when and where she could make her move. The tallest man adjusted his stance, shifting his weight slightly forward. In another second, he would overextend, making it possible for her to redirect the force of his weapon. The second man's gaze had softened momentarily as he glanced toward the alley backup. Escape? It didn't matter. Each second of hesitation was an advantage Sarah could exploit. She allowed a few moments to pass, letting tension build. The gunman's patience was thinning. Their arrogance was clouding their judgment. And that was when she saw it, the tiniest opening. A micro-movement in the tallest man's shoulder as he shifted his weight, one hand slightly lower than intended, the gun barrel just enough out of line to make a critical difference. Time slowed in her mind. Years of reflexive training kicked in. She didn't panic. She didn't act hastily. Instead, she prepared to exploit that moment with surgical precision. Her body tensed just enough, posture adjusted for leverage, eyes locked on the target, ready to convert calculation into action. The third man, who had remained silent until now, shifted nervously, fumbling with something in his pocket. A faint metallic sound, the tiniest noise, but it betrayed his presence, his lack of confidence, his unsteady control. Sarah catalogued it immediately. Every detail mattered: movement, sound, intention. The street seemed to hold its breath. Passers-by were oblivious, yet the tension radiated invisibly, like static in the air before a storm. Sarah maintained her outward calm, letting the men believe their intimidation had worked. But inside, she was alive, alert, calculating every angle, anticipating every possible reaction. Her mind ran through contingencies at lightning speed. If he fires, if they move, if the other two intervene, if a bystander distracts. Each scenario already accounted for, already rehearsed, already solvable. Training had forged this instinct. Combat experience had sharpened it. Calm under pressure wasn't a choice, it was survival. "You don't have to do this," Sarah said quietly, her words deliberate, her tone unwavering. It wasn't a plea, it was a statement, one designed to plant doubt. Her calm composure, almost unnervingly so, created hesitation. It was subtle, yet effective. Confidence, composure, discipline, three weapons she wielded far more effectively than the pistols they brandished. The tallest man's finger twitched on the trigger, betraying impatience. The second man's eyes darted toward the alley, betraying distraction. The third man fidgeted, hands uncertain. Sarah had recognized the flaw. overconfidence and hesitation interwoven, a perfect storm for action. One final glance at the gun barrel, a subtle shift in weight, a minuscule movement, and the balance of power would tip. Sarah had the advantage. She had been patient. She had observed. And now, the window to act was about to open. In that tense moment, the truth became clear. The danger was real, immediate, and lethal, but so was her preparation. To the world, she appeared trapped, but in reality, she was already moving. Her mind, body, and instincts aligned. The three men had revealed their weakness without realizing it, and Sarah was ready to exploit it, turning their threats into a chain of consequences they could not escape. Time was measured in fractions of a second. Every detail mattered. Every blink, every twitch, every shift in balance was significant. Sarah Mitchell was calm, calculated, and ready. And the next instant would determine who controlled the street and who walked away alive. The threat had been revealed. Now it was time for action. The street seemed to hold its breath, the quiet of late afternoon amplifying the faintest sounds. A scuff of shoes on asphalt, the hum of the SUV engine, the distant bark of a dog. Sarah Mitchell's body remained still, outwardly calm, yet every nerve fired with precision. The gun pressed against her temple was a tangible threat, but her mind was already several moves ahead. Each second that passed, she calculated, observed, and prepared. She didn't panic. She didn't flinch. She had faced far more lethal situations in hostile territories, and every skill she had honed was coming to life in this ordinary town street. Her first priority was simple: create control without revealing intent. The tallest man, holding the gun, leaned slightly forward, impatience flashing in his eyes. The other two moved subtly, adjusting their angles, attempting to block any exit she might take. They assumed they had the upper hand, that fear had paralyzed her. They couldn't have been more wrong. Sarah shifted slightly, just enough to adjust her center of gravity while maintaining a calm posture. Her hands remained relaxed, almost idle, but her fingers brushed lightly against the zipper of her bag, a subtle test of weight and balance. Every movement was deliberate, measured, designed to appear non-threatening while positioning her for leverage. The world saw serenity. She saw opportunity. The second man fidgeted nervously, glancing at the alley where she had briefly considered maneuvering. He leaned slightly toward his companions, whispering something inaudible. Sarah noticed the microtells, the fleeting eye contact, the shift of weight from one foot to the other, the tight grip on his jacket. Every detail was being catalogued. These men had training, yes, but it was amateur, naive, and riddled with mistakes. She spoke softly, almost conversationally, a gentle murmur designed to unsettle. "You're rushing," she said. Her calm voice, so at odds with the situation, caused a flicker of uncertainty in their eyes. The tallest man barked a warning, his grip tightening on the gun, yet his pulse betrayed tension he couldn't mask. The subtle display of confidence from her side was already planting seeds of doubt. Sarah's gaze swept over the environment, noting potential advantages. The side alley offered cover. A low wall could serve as leverage. A parked car could be used for barrier or redirection. Her mind ran through dozens of potential movements in a fraction of a second, calculating angles, timing, and risk. Every microsecond counted, and she was already prepared. The tallest man's finger twitched on the trigger. Small, almost imperceptible, yet enough to confirm her earlier assessment. He was inexperienced and overconfident. One micro-movement could be redirected. One misstep could tip the balance entirely. Sarah's body remained outwardly relaxed, but inside, she was a coiled spring, ready to strike with the precision that had saved her countless times before. She allowed herself a faint observation, almost playful. The second man was trying to assert control, leaning slightly closer, yet every subtle adjustment made him vulnerable. Sarah's eyes flicked to the smallest of details. A wrist angle, a weight shift, the way the gunman's shoulder dipped. Each one was a clue, a doorway to gaining control. Then, almost imperceptibly, the third man shifted. His nervousness betrayed him. A twitch, a glance toward the alley, a fumbled hand reaching for something hidden. Sarah cataloged it instantly. He was uncoordinated, reactive rather than proactive. These small mistakes, trivial to most, were the cracks through which she would slip. She didn't rush. She waited. Patience, honed through countless SEAL missions, was her weapon. Sarah allowed a subtle motion, a step to the side, just enough to adjust her stance. To the men, it appeared insignificant, almost idle. But in reality, it positioned her weight perfectly for leverage, redirected her center of gravity, and subtly moved her closer to the alley as a fallback point. Every motion was designed to appear casual while preparing for decisive action. "You know," she said softly, "confidence without skill is dangerous." The words were calm, almost conversational, yet they resonated like a silent challenge. The tallest man scowled, unsure whether to react with aggression or dismiss her words. This hesitation, however brief, was enough. In the SEAL world, hesitation was fatal, and Sarah had trained her entire life to exploit moments like this. The second man's impatience grew. He moved a step closer, trying to assert dominance, but his motion was sloppy, his balance off. Sarah noted the minor error: weight distribution, foot placement, grip on the gun. These micro details revealed vulnerability, and she silently prepared to capitalize. The world saw fearlessness. She saw opportunity, calculated and deliberate. Then the tallest man made the critical mistake, a micro shift in his stance, a slight overreach as he adjusted the gun. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Sarah recognized it immediately. Training and experience had honed her perception to notice things others missed. That single motion provided the leverage she needed. Every contingency she had rehearsed mentally now aligned with reality. Her hands twitched, just a fraction, testing balance, ensuring that when she acted, it would be precise. Her feet, planted firmly, allowed for rapid pivot or redirection. Her mind ran through sequences: disarm, control, incapacitate, maintain awareness of bystanders. Every element of the environment was considered, every potential reaction accounted for. The third man's nervous fidgeting added a secondary advantage. Sarah saw the way his attention wavered between her and his companions, his body language betraying fear beneath bravado. He was reacting, not acting, and reacting as predictable, which made him manageable. Sarah's calmness unnerved them. Her eyes, focused and unwavering, conveyed authority without aggression. The tallest man's grip on the gun tightened reflexively, the tension visible in the muscles of his arm and neck. He thought he was in control. He wasn't. She let the moment stretch, allowing tension to build. The men's impatience began to show. Their arrogance was cracking. Each micro-movement, each slight hesitation, was another advantage Sarah cataloged. Her patience would pay off. She didn't need to rush. In fact, acting too soon could waste the opening she had painstakingly observed. A slight breeze stirred dust along the street. Sarah subtly shifted her gaze to the nearest trash bin and discarded objects. Every potential distraction, every environmental variable, was accounted for. She was preparing to move, but the timing had to be perfect. The tallest man's finger twitched again on the trigger. Another micro-error. Sarah noted it with clinical precision. The second man leaned forward, trying to assert control. Another misstep. And the third fumbled again, betraying his lack of coordination. Every flaw was a doorway to leverage. Sarah's patience held. Calmness was her ally. Observing, cataloging, analyzing every second brought her closer to action. She was ready. Every contingency, every reaction, every possible outcome had already been considered. The men believed they had the upper hand. They didn't, and in that moment, the street became her stage. The ordinary town, the quiet afternoon, the unsuspecting bystanders, all were part of the environment she would command. The first move was coming, and when it did, the gunman would discover exactly why you never underestimated a Navy SEAL. The world seemed to pause for a heartbeat. Every second, every breath, every micro-movement mattered. The gun pressed against Sarah Mitchell's temple was a cold reminder that this encounter was deadly serious, but she had been here before, in far more lethal circumstances. Her body was poised, her mind running through contingencies, her senses heightened. The slightest error from the men in front of her could and would be exploited with surgical precision. Then it happened. The tallest man, attempting to assert dominance, made the smallest miscalculation. His weight shifted too far forward as he adjusted the gun. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Sarah's trained eyes spotted it instantly. In a split second, her muscles coiled like springs, her reflexes honed from years of SEAL training ready to strike. She moved first, not with brute force, but with precision. Her hand shot upward in a fluid motion, redirecting the gun barrel just enough to unbalance him. At the same time, she twisted her body slightly, using leverage to destabilize his stance. The tallest man stumbled backward, his confidence crumbling in an instant. He had assumed control, assumed fear, but he had never faced someone like Sarah. The other two assailants froze, their laughter and bravado dying in their throats as the world shifted in seconds. What had been a display of control turned into chaos, and they were unprepared for the precision and speed with which Sarah moved. Her eyes flicked to the second man, whose hesitation had grown palpable. He had leaned forward, trying to compensate for his leader's stumble, but his weight was uneven, his balance flawed. Sarah used his momentum against him, subtly stepping aside while twisting her body, redirecting his force. In less than a heartbeat, he lost his footing, teetering as she shifted him without even touching the weapon directly. The third man fumbled, panicked by the sudden disruption. His hands, once confident, now betrayed him with tremors. Sarah's mind raced through the possibilities: disarm, control, incapacitate, maintain situational awareness. She chose efficiency over violence, wherever possible quick, decisive moves to neutralize threats without unnecessary escalation. The tallest man, struggling to regain balance, raised the gun instinctively. But Sarah had anticipated this. With a swift pivot, she applied leverage against his wrist, redirecting the barrel safely aside. His surprise and panic made him vulnerable. Her movements were fast, controlled, and lethal in precision, but not deadly. She relied on technique, using the attacker's own momentum in mistakes against them. In mere seconds, the tallest man found himself off balance, the gun redirected, his authority evaporating. The second man, now flustered and unsure, had no choice but to comply with the emerging power dynamic. Sarah's calm authority radiated like a physical force, and even in his panic, he recognized it. The third man made one last desperate move, lunging toward her with raised hands, hoping to regain dominance. Sarah anticipated it. With minimal effort, she sidestepped, guiding him past her using his own momentum, tripping him just enough to send him sprawling. His momentum carried him to the curb, and he landed awkwardly, stunned. It was over in the span of moments, yet the effects rippled like shockwaves. The men, who had approached with arrogance and fearlessness, were now disoriented, struggling to comprehend the rapid turn of events. Their initial confidence shattered, replaced by panic and disbelief. Sarah's breathing remained steady, her outward calm unshaken. But inside, her mind catalogued every micro detail. Every step, every movement, every reaction had been anticipated. The environment, previously neutral, had become part of her control strategy. The uneven pavement, the curb, the subtle incline all leveraged to unbalance and neutralize the threats. The tallest man, finally regaining partial composure, tried to regain control, shouting threats as if words could restore his authority. But his gestures were clumsy, his stance unstable. Sarah's presence alone dictated the tempo now. She didn't need to shout, didn't need to brandish force or calm. Deliberate movements conveyed dominance more effectively than any gun. The second man, still recovering from his stumble, realized the reality of the situation. He had underestimated Sarah's capability, misjudged her composure, and failed to anticipate the precision of her training. Panic replaced his bravado, hesitation replaced confidence. Sarah's eyes locked on him, reading his intention, gauging his next move. She was always one step ahead. The third man, struggling to rise from the curb, glanced at his companions in disbelief. Confusion and fear replaced the arrogance that had brought them here. They were uncoordinated, inexperienced, and entirely outmatched. And yet, their confusion played perfectly into Sarah's hands. With fluid, decisive movements, she ensured all three men were under control. A twist here, a push there enough to destabilize without unnecessary injury. Her goal was containment, precision, and maintaining control until help could arrive. Every action was calculated, every movement purposeful. By now, passers-by had begun to notice. A few had paused at a distance, unsure of what they were witnessing. Sarah remained calm, composed, and focused entirely on the task at hand. She didn't seek attention. She didn't need it. The situation demanded control, not recognition. The SUV's engine still hummed quietly nearby, the men's original escape plan now utterly irrelevant. Sarah had turned their strategy against them without drawing a single shot. Their guns were ineffective in her hands, or rather, in her control of the situation. She had taken the lethal potential and neutralized it through skill, precision, and tactical intelligence. The tallest man made one last desperate attempt to assert dominance, lunging forward with a clumsy swing. Sarah's reflexes anticipated the movement. She sidestepped, using his momentum to guide him off balance again. His foot caught on the curb, sending him tumbling backward. Panic overtook rational thought, and he scrambled to regain footing, realizing too late that control had permanently shifted. The second man attempted to flee, but Sarah's positioning and awareness blocked his path. He tried to push past her, but she guided him gently yet firmly to the ground, ensuring compliance without causing unnecessary harm. Every move was precise, efficient, and deliberate. The third man, still struggling to rise, saw his companions neutralized and froze. Sarah didn't need to touch him. Her stance, her calm authority, her focused gaze were enough to immobilize him. Fear and respect collided in his mind. He realized, finally, that this was no ordinary woman, no ordinary confrontation. The street, once dominated by their perceived control, now bowed to hers. Sarah Mitchell, calm, composed, and precise, had transformed a threatening situation into one fully under her command. She didn't boast, didn't gloat. Her focus remained singular: control, containment, and the neutralization of immediate threats. As the dust settled, the gunmen lay sprawled, disoriented and panicked. Their arrogance, overconfidence, and inexperience had been exploited with surgical precision. Sarah's outward calm had masked her lethal training and tactical intelligence, leaving them stunned and defeated. And in that instant, the lesson was clear. They had pressed a gun to her head, believed themselves in control, and discovered, far too late, why you never mess with a Navy SEAL. The street, once tense with imminent danger, now felt unnaturally still. Dust hung in the air like frozen particles, suspended in the silent aftermath of chaos. Sarah Mitchell's eyes scanned her surroundings, taking in every detail with clinical precision. The three men she had just neutralized lay sprawled across the pavement, disoriented, breathing heavily, and slowly realizing the catastrophic errors that had led to their defeat. Her breathing was steady, controlled, a stark contrast to the palpable panic emanating from the assailants. Outwardly, she appeared calm and collected, almost serene. But internally, her mind was fully engaged, cataloging every variable, every potential risk, every next step. SEAL training had taught her that a threat wasn't over until the environment itself was secure. She moved first toward the tallest man, who was attempting to rise, eyes wild with fear. With a firm but non-lethal push, she guided him back down onto the pavement, redirecting his momentum to keep him off balance. Her precision was flawless. Leverage, balance, and timing all executed without drawing a weapon. Even without lethal force, she commanded absolute control. The second man, who had attempted to flee moments earlier, now realized escape was impossible. Sarah positioned herself between him and the nearest exit, her body language radiating authority. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't shout. Her presence alone communicated dominance, instilling fear while maintaining absolute calm. He froze, understanding instinctively that any sudden move could worsen his situation. The third man, still struggling to comprehend what had just happened, kept glancing at his companions. Confusion and fear clouded his mind. Sarah's eyes met his, unwavering, assessing intent. Any hesitation, any attempt to resist, would be met with a controlled response. She had neutralized their weapons, disrupted their coordination, and now maintained full environmental control. The street had become her domain. Her gaze shifted to the parked black SUV. The vehicle's presence had initially added to the threat, but now it was a tactical advantage. Positioned perfectly for surveillance and escape by the assailants, it was now a containment zone. She moved with silent precision to ensure no additional weapons or tools of aggression remained inside. Every inch of the environment was evaluated, every potential hazard accounted for. Bystanders had begun to emerge, hesitant yet curious, whispering in awe and fear. Sarah remained composed, aware of the onlookers, but focused entirely on the tactical situation. Civilian presence introduced new variables: potential interference, accidental escalation, or unpredictable behavior. She accounted for all of them, positioning herself strategically between the assailants and the crowd. Her calm authority communicated safety to civilians while asserting dominance over the threats. The assailants had been professionals only in their own minds. Their arrogance, lack of coordination, and poor judgment had made them predictable. Sarah exploited every weakness: momentum, balance, distraction, and fear. Each movement was deliberate, designed to maintain control without unnecessary violence. She ensured that even if one attempted a last-ditch resistance, it would fail. Precision and patience had secured victory. She took a step back, giving herself space to observe and respond. The tallest man, the leader of the group, finally attempted a feeble act of defiance. He lunged slightly toward the second man, perhaps attempting to regroup or intimidate. Sarah reacted instantly, a subtle pivot redirecting his momentum. His energy, misdirected, became a tool for control rather than a threat. Every step, every motion, every glance was calculated in real time. Her mind assessed contingencies for potential reinforcement. What if they had an accomplice nearby? What if weapons were hidden elsewhere? The SEAL mindset demanded anticipation, preparation, and control. Sarah was always several moves ahead. Even as the men lay sprawled, defeated, Her tactical awareness remained active, ensuring the environment was secure and under control. A faint sound footsteps approaching from a side street caused her to pause and scan the area. Her instincts kicked in immediately. Was this a bystander, an accomplice, or law enforcement? Her hand subtly shifted near her bag, not in threat, but in readiness. She had trained for moments like these, where situational awareness determined survival. The footsteps continued, deliberate and measured, confirming her assessment. Someone was approaching cautiously. Moments later, 2 police officers emerged from the shadows, drawn by calls from concerned citizens who had witnessed the unfolding events. Sarah remained calm, raising a hand in acknowledgement without breaking her tactical focus. She understood that the situation now required collaboration without surrendering control prematurely. The officers' eyes widened as they took in the scene. 3 disoriented men on the pavement, a calm woman standing between them and the crowd, the black SUV, and the quiet tension that still hung in the air. They instinctively knew something extraordinary had just occurred. Sarah lowered herself into a controlled posture, signaling the men to remain on the ground. "Stay down. Don't move," she instructed firmly, but without aggression. Her voice carried authority that transcended the need for force. The men complied instantly, their fear absolute. She had neutralized the immediate threat and maintained control until trained law enforcement could intervene. The officers moved in carefully, assessing the scene, their weapons ready but unnecessary. Sarah provided a concise, calm briefing. 3 suspects armed, now contained. No additional threats observed. Maintain perimeter. I've neutralized immediate danger. Her words were precise, professional, and devoid of ego. Every word reinforced her command of the situation. The crowd watched in awe as the officers began securing the area. Sarah's tactical advantage had been maintained throughout, preventing escalation and ensuring civilian safety. The assailants, once cocky and aggressive, were now helpless, their plans shattered, their arrogance replaced with fear and confusion. Sarah scanned the environment one last time, ensuring no overlooked hazards remained. A minor imbalance in a sidewalk, a discarded object, a potential escape route, all had been accounted for. Her awareness was comprehensive. She had not only survived a potentially lethal encounter, but had converted the environment and the adversaries into controlled elements of her strategy. As the police led the assailants to their patrol car, murmurs of disbelief spread through the gathered crowd. Witnesses whispered about the calm, composed woman who had single-handedly neutralized 3 armed men without firing a single shot. Sarah's presence radiated authority, competence, and lethal capability. Even if unseen, it was palpably felt. Once the immediate threat had been neutralized and law enforcement had taken control, Sarah allowed herself a moment of reflection. Her training, instincts, and patience had turned what could have been a disaster into a controlled resolution. The street, once filled with tension and threat, now echoed only with the distant hum of traffic and murmurs of astonishment. The lesson was clear. Situational awareness, patience, and precision can transform chaos into control. Sarah Mitchell had demonstrated this expertly, turning a threatening encounter into a testament of skill, discipline, and tactical mastery. As she stepped back, allowing the police to fully manage the scene, Sarah remained vigilant. Her eyes scanned the perimeter, checking for residual threats, potential witnesses, or overlooked hazards. Every detail mattered. The tactical advantage she had established was complete, her control absolute, and the danger fully neutralized. By the time she melted back into the crowd, unnoticed yet fully aware, the lesson lingered in the minds of everyone who had witnessed the event. You never underestimate someone trained to survive impossible odds. Sarah Mitchell had proven that calm composure and precise action could dominate even the most dangerous and chaotic situations. The street slowly returned to its rhythm. Birds resumed their chirping. Cars drove past, and pedestrians whispered in astonishment about the events that had just unfolded. Yet, for those who had been close enough to witness, the memory would linger, etched sharply in their minds. They had seen something extraordinary. A lone woman, calm and composed, neutralizing 3 armed men with unmatched precision. Sarah Mitchell stood silently at the edge of the crowd, her posture relaxed but alert. Even though the immediate threat had been neutralized and law enforcement had assumed control, she remained aware. Every detail mattered. Civilians milling too close, officers assessing the scene, the positions of the suspects, and the subtle shifts in the environment. This vigilance was second nature. For Sarah, even after the danger had passed, the world required scrutiny. A few officers approached her cautiously. "Ma'am," one said, his voice tinged with awe, "we need a statement." "What exactly happened here?" Sarah nodded, maintaining her calm. 3 armed men attempted to rob me," she explained clearly, avoiding embellishment. "They were uncoordinated and overconfident. I neutralized them until you arrived." Her tone was matter-of-fact, professional, yet there was a quiet authority that left no doubt about her competence. The officers glanced at each other, incredulous. It was rare, almost unprecedented, to see a civilian, especially a woman, handle such a situation with this level of skill and composure. They were trained, armed, and equipped, yet here she stood, unshaken and in complete control. Bystanders whispered among themselves, a mixture of awe and disbelief in their voices. "Did you see that?" one murmured. "She didn't even flinch." And those guys didn't stand a chance. Children who had been nearby clutched their parents' hands, wide-eyed, their fear slowly turning to fascination. Some adults shook, their heads muttering about courage, training, and the kind of presence that made heroes. Sarah observed silently, recognizing the impact her actions had not for ego, but as a reflection of preparedness, discipline, and the practical application of skill. The tallest of the assailants, now restrained and handcuffed by officers, glared at her with a mixture of fear and disbelief. His arrogance, which had fueled the initial encounter, had evaporated entirely. The second man, seated in the back of a patrol car, muttered incoherent excuses to himself, desperately attempting to justify their failure. The third man sat quietly, too stunned to react, his eyes reflecting the stark reality of underestimating someone with the training and discipline of a Navy SEAL. Sarah's mind remained sharp. She observed the officers securing the scene, ensuring the suspects' weapons were safely collected, and confirming there were no additional threats nearby. Even now, she cataloged details: the alignment of vehicles, the positioning of civilians, the layout of the surrounding buildings, and the potential exit routes. Situational awareness was not something that ended with the immediate threat. It extended into the aftermath. One officer finally asked, "Mom, did you do this alone?" Sarah's gaze was steady. "Yes," she said simply. There was no boast, only clarity. They underestimated me. That was their mistake. Everything else was a matter of observation, anticipation, and execution. Her words, calm yet precise, seemed to leave a lasting impression. The officers nodded, understanding that they had witnessed a unique display of skill. She had turned a potentially deadly situation into one of absolute control, demonstrating restraint, tactical awareness, and precision without resorting to lethal force. News of the incident quickly spread through the town. Social media posts emerged within minutes. Woman neutralizes armed attackers with unbelievable calm. Navy SEAL training saves the day on Main Street. Headlines quickly followed, painting a picture of courage and extraordinary skill. Sarah had become an unwitting hero, though she remained mostly unaware of the attention. Her focus was on observation, situational awareness, and ensuring no lingering threats existed. Despite the growing attention, Sarah maintained composure. She knew the moment was about control, not recognition. The real victory was survival, neutralization of threats, and preservation of life, including her own and that of bystanders. The accolades, while flattering, were secondary to the practical execution of her training. The community, meanwhile, was shaken and inspired. Residents gathered in small clusters, discussing the event in hushed tones. They spoke of bravery, precision, and the calm demeanor of a woman who faced life-threatening danger head-on. Some speculated about her background, piecing together clues from her composure and confidence, assuming she had military experience. Meanwhile, law enforcement conducted their official procedures, collecting evidence, photographing the scene, and taking statements from bystanders. Every officer on site recognized the unusual nature of the encounter. It was rare to see an unarmed individual, especially a civilian, dominate a situation so completely without resorting to firearms. Her actions had prevented potential injuries and maintained public safety with minimal risk. Sarah observed quietly as the suspects were loaded into patrol cars. She noted their positioning, behavior, and compliance. Even restrained and defeated, they remained potential risks. Human unpredictability was always a factor. Her mind cataloged what had transpired, the lessons learned, and the successful application of training under real-world stress. One of the bystanders, an elderly man who had witnessed the confrontation from a nearby bench, approached cautiously. "Ma'am, that was incredible," he stammered. "You saved lives today." Sarah offered a small nod. "I reacted to what was in front of me. You all were safe, and that's what mattered." Her humility contrasted with the extraordinary skill she had demonstrated. Her focus was always on action, not applause. The news crews began arriving, cameras rolling, microphones thrust forward. Sarah understood the necessity of statements, but maintained discretion. She provided a concise, factual account. 3 men attempted an armed robbery. They were uncoordinated and overconfident. I neutralized the immediate threat until law enforcement arrived. Everyone is safe. That's all. Her calm, professional demeanor lent credibility, and her words carried authority without exaggeration. Even as the attention grew, Sarah remained vigilant. She scanned the environment for lingering threats, noting exits, crowds, and potential distractions. For a trained SEAL, awareness never ceased. She had learned the hard way that danger could emerge from the most unexpected places, and she would not lower her guard until the environment was secure. The suspects, now in custody, offered muttered complaints and excuses, but the officers were unmoved. They had witnessed firsthand the consequences of underestimating someone with exceptional training and discipline. Their arrogance had been neutralized, their control stripped away, and their plan dismantled. As the day drew on, the crowd dispersed, leaving only a few lingering witnesses and the officers handling the formalities. Sarah finally allowed herself a slow exhale, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. The situation was resolved. Civilians were safe. Law enforcement had control, and the assailants had learned a lesson they would not forget. You never, under any circumstances, underestimate a Navy SEAL. In the quiet aftermath, Sarah reflected on the incident. Training, preparation, situational awareness, and patience had turned a potentially deadly encounter into a controlled resolution. Every detail mattered, every observation counted, and every decision had been executed with precision. It was not about heroism. It was about competence, discipline, and survival. The story of that afternoon would ripple through the town for weeks, inspiring awe and admiration. Yet for Sarah, it was simply another instance of applying her skills when it mattered most. Calm, calculated, and uncompromisingly precise, she had faced danger head-on and emerged victorious. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows over the quiet street. What had been a scene of tension and danger earlier in the day now seemed almost surreal. Civilians had dispersed, police had completed their formalities, and the three assailants had been taken into custody. Yet, the memory of what had transpired lingered in the air like a palpable energy, impossible to ignore. Sarah Mitchell remained near the sidewalk, observing as officers secured the area, her calm presence a testament to the power of training and composure. For Sarah, the day's events were both routine and extraordinary. To an ordinary observer, a woman neutralizing three armed men without firing a shot would seem impossible. To her, it was a culmination of years of preparation, discipline, and instinct. She had relied on every skill she had learned as a Navy SEAL: patience, situational awareness, precision, and the ability to anticipate human behavior under stress. Each of these qualities had turned a potentially lethal situation into a controlled resolution. The officers who had witnessed the event approached her once more. "Ma'am, we're documenting everything," one said, "and we'd like a full statement for the report." Sarah nodded, understanding the necessity. She recounted the events clearly, concisely, and without exaggeration. Every observation, every tactical maneuver, every decision was included. Her calm demeanor and precise recollection impressed the officers. They had rarely seen someone so unshakable under pressure. Meanwhile, news crews and social media users had already begun spreading the story. Videos from bystanders circulated online, showing fleeting glimpses of Sarah's composure as chaos erupted. Comments flooded in words like hero, fearless, and incredible dominated the reactions. Sarah remained indifferent to the attention. Her focus had never been on recognition, but on action. Yet she understood that the story could inspire others, teach the importance of preparation, and demonstrate the effectiveness of training and discipline. As the evening wore on, Sarah found a quiet moment to reflect. She thought about the three men who had attempted to intimidate and control her. Their arrogance, lack of coordination, and overconfidence had been their downfall. But she also recognized the lesson in restraint. Her goal had never been to punish, but to neutralize, to prevent harm, and to maintain control. Every action she had taken was calculated, measured, and deliberate. The result was not just survival, but mastery over a chaotic situation. Civilians who had witnessed the events approached her cautiously, some with gratitude, others with awe. An elderly woman handed her a folded piece of paper, trembling slightly. "Thank you," she said. "You saved lives today." Sarah accepted the gesture with a nod, offering a quiet smile. The gratitude was meaningful, but it was not the reason she had acted. Her training demanded effectiveness over applause. Yet, even small gestures of acknowledgement reinforced the importance of vigilance and skill. Local law enforcement invited her to the station to provide a full report. She complied, answering questions and providing insights that could help officers understand the dynamics of the encounter. She emphasized the importance of observation, anticipation, and the psychological interplay between threat and perception. Her insights were invaluable, providing a rare civilian perspective informed by elite military training. As the night grew deeper, Sarah walked home through the quiet streets, her mind cataloging the day's events. Each movement of the assailants, each misstep, and each decision had been a lesson in human behavior and tactical advantage. She reflected on the fact that preparation, calmness under pressure, and an unwavering focus on objectives could turn even the most dangerous situations in one's favor. The three men, now in custody, would face legal consequences, but more importantly, they had learned the lesson far beyond the courtroom, the consequences of underestimating someone trained to survive impossible odds. Their arrogance and misjudgment had been exposed, leaving them with a stark reminder that skill, discipline, and patience outweigh brute force. In the days that followed, the incident became a point of discussion across the community and beyond. Local news outlets interviewed Sarah, focusing not just on the dramatic events, but also on her calm, methodical approach. She emphasized preparation, situational awareness, and the ability to remain composed under pressure, lessons that extended beyond self-defense into daily life. Her message resonated with many. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it. Despite the growing attention, Sarah remained humble. She understood that her actions had been possible only because of preparation, experience, and discipline. Heroism, in her view, was less about recognition and more about responsibility, the responsibility to act effectively when others could not. She continued her life quietly, aware that her training had equipped her not just to survive, but to protect, to anticipate, and to maintain control in the face of danger. Months later, the story still circulated, shared as an example of courage, precision, and resilience. Children recounted the tale in classrooms, adults discussed it in workplaces, and law enforcement officers studied it as a case study in tactical awareness. Sarah's actions had transcended the immediate threat. They had become a lesson in human behavior, discipline, and the power of calm decisiveness. In private moments, Sarah reflected on the incident with clarity. Every micro-movement of the assailants, every hesitation, every miscalculation had been a doorway to control. Her ability to remain calm, to analyze, and to act decisively had been honed through years of rigorous training. But beyond the technique, she understood the human element. Fear, overconfidence, hesitation, all factors that could be exploited without cruelty. Her reflection carried a deeper lesson. True power does not lie in aggression or intimidation, but in the mastery of one's mind, body, and environment. She had demonstrated that power in a moment of crisis, transforming potential disaster into a display of skill, precision, and restraint. The street had witnessed a rare example of calm dominance, a testament to the training and discipline of a Navy SEAL. As evening faded into night, Sarah looked back at the quiet street one last time. The echoes of the day's events lingered, but the immediate danger had passed. Civilians were safe, law enforcement had control, and the assailants had been neutralized. The world had seen a glimpse of what preparation, discipline, and calm decisiveness could achieve. And in that quiet moment, Sarah Mitchell understood the enduring truth. Danger can come unexpectedly, and those who are prepared, disciplined, and unflinching will always hold the advantage. She had lived it, demonstrated it, and imparted a lesson that would resonate far beyond the street where the encounter had unfolded. The story would be told, retold, and remembered, not for drama, but for the demonstration of skill, patience, and courage. And for Sarah, it was not about fame or recognition. It was about the quiet satisfaction of having faced danger, controlled it, and emerged unshaken. She walked away from the street, her presence calm and unassuming. But the memory of her actions would remain a vivid lesson for all who had witnessed it. You never, under any circumstances, underestimate a Navy SEAL.